World War I, often referred to as the Great War, was a monumental conflict that spanned 4 years, from 1914 to 1918, and radically changed the course of history. With a total of 70 million military mobilizations and an estimated 16 million deaths, this war didn't just reshape borders and countries, it redefined the global political landscape and altered the course of civilization itself. Here's the full, detailed story of World War I, covering every perspective and major event. Before the first shot was fired, Europe was a ticking time bomb. The early 20th century was marked by complex alliances, intense nationalism, militarism, and colonial rivalries. The continent was divided into 2 main alliance systems: the Triple Entente, which involved nations like France, Russia, and Great Britain, and on the other side there was the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, which would later switch sides. These alliances were born out of distrust and fear, each side trying to secure its future against the other. Tensions were heightened by imperial competition, especially in Africa and Asia. The political climate was thick with competition, and it wouldn't take much for things to boil over. On June 28, 1914, the spark that ignited the fire of war came in Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated by Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb nationalist, a member of the Black Hand. This assassination was more than just the death of a royal. It was the culmination of years of rising tensions between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, a key player in the Balkan region. Austria-Hungary, with the backing of Germany, demanded harsh penalties from Serbia, knowing that Serbia had the support of Russia. Russia, in turn, called upon its allies, and soon the entire European continent was on the brink of war. The death of one man set off a chain reaction that led to a global conflict. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914, marking the start of hostilities. Russia, allied with Serbia, began to mobilize its forces, leading to a declaration of war by Germany on August 1, 1914. Germany then marched into Belgium, prompting Great Britain to declare war on Germany on August 4, 1914, in defense of Belgium's neutrality. The alliances quickly turned Europe into opposing camps. The Central Powers, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and later the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria, faced off against the Allied powers: France, Great Britain, Russia, and eventually Italy, Japan, and the United States. Once the war began, the Western Front, stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland, became the focal point of conflict. Trench warfare dominated this front, with soldiers digging long, complex networks of trenches to protect themselves from the devastating artillery and machine gun fire. Life in the trenches was horrific. Soldiers endured constant bombardment, gas attacks, disease, and a pervasive sense of hopelessness. The landscape was reduced to a vast wasteland of mud and craters, giving rise to the infamous no man's land, the barren strip between opposing trenches where soldiers could be shot on sight. On the other side, major battles like the Battle of the Somme, 1916, the Battle of Verdun, 1916, and Passchendaele, 1917, saw unimaginable casualties, often with little to show for it in terms of territorial gains. The war on the Western Front was, at its heart, a war of attrition, where both sides tried to wear down the other with relentless, brutal offensives. While the Western Front was bogged down in stalemate, the Eastern Front between Russia and Germany, Austria-Hungary, was more fluid. The vast distances of the Russian Empire made it difficult to sustain large battles over long periods. Early in the war, Russia suffered several defeats at the hands of the Germans, most notably at the Battle of Tannenberg, 1914, where Russian forces were surrounded and annihilated. However, Russia's massive size allowed it to field enormous armies, and it initially succeeded in pushing back Austria-Hungary. Yet, the Russian army's lack of modern equipment and training, combined with internal political instability, ultimately led to disastrous results. By 1917, the pressure of war contributed to the collapse of the Russian Empire, which was overtaken by the Russian Revolution. While Europe was the main battleground, World War I was truly a global war. The Ottoman Empire, which had joined the Central Powers, found itself fighting against the Allied powers in the Middle East, where battles were fought in the deserts of Mesopotamia, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Arabian Peninsula. The Gallipoli Campaign, 1915, was one of the major Allied failures, where British and French forces, including soldiers from Australia and New Zealand, attempted to take control of the Dardanelles Strait and knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war. It ended in disaster, with tens of thousands of casualties. Meanwhile, Japan fought against German colonies in China and the Pacific, seizing strategic islands and ports. The United States, which had initially remained neutral, was drawn into the war in 1917 due to several factors, including Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare and the interception of the Zimmermann telegram, in which Germany promised Mexico the return of territories lost to the U.S. if Mexico joined the war on the Central Powers side. The entry of the United States in April of 1917 was a turning point. With fresh soldiers, resources, and financial support, the U.S. tipped the balance in favor of the Allies. The presence of American forces on the Western Front bolstered the weary Allied armies, and their arrival helped turn the tide in favor of the Allies. By late 1917 and early 1918, the Central Powers were in disarray. Germany, under intense pressure from the Allied forces, launched a series of offensives in the spring of 1918 in a desperate bid to win the war before American troops could make a decisive impact. These offensives initially pushed the Allies back, but the German forces were overstretched and exhausted. As the Allies launched counterattacks, Germany began to collapse. The Ottoman Empire had already fallen apart, with revolts breaking out in its territories. Austria-Hungary was crumbling under internal ethnic strife, and its soldiers were increasingly unwilling to continue the war. On November 11, 1918, after years of bitter fighting and staggering loss of life, an armistice was signed between Germany and the Allies. The war was officially over, but the consequences were far from finished. The war's formal end came with the Treaty of Versailles, signed on June 28, 1919, 5 years to the day after Archduke Franz Ferdinand's assassination. The treaty imposed heavy reparations and territorial losses on Germany, including the loss of key territories like the Saar Basin, the Rhineland, and all overseas colonies. The treaty also redrew national boundaries, breaking up empires like Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. One of the most controversial aspects of the treaty was Article 231, the War Guilt Clause, which placed full responsibility for the war on Germany, a clause that would fuel resentment and lead to the rise of extremism in the interwar years, including the eventual outbreak of World War II. World War I fundamentally reshaped the world. It led to the collapse of 4 empires: the Austro-Hungarian, Russian, Ottoman, and German empires. It gave rise to new nations like Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and Poland, and sowed the seeds for future conflicts, including World War II. The Treaty of Versailles and its harsh penalties set the stage for the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party in Germany. The war also had a profound impact on the soldiers and civilians who lived through it. The psychological trauma, known as shell shock, now recognized as PTSD, affected millions of veterans. The war also led to major advancements in technology and medicine, but these came at a heavy price. World War I was more than just a military conflict. It was a reshaping of the world. It sowed the seeds of future conflicts, changed the political landscape, and dramatically altered the lives of millions. The war's legacy continued to affect geopolitics for decades, ultimately leading to the outbreak of World War II just 2 decades later. And yet, its effects are still felt today, in the borders of nations, the policies of countries, and the memories of the brave people who lived through the tragedy. If you enjoyed this journey through history and want to uncover more untold stories from the past, don't forget to hit that subscribe button with the bell icon and like the video. Until next time, stay curious.